Well, welcome to the Storied Outdoors. I'm your host, Brian Gill, along with my co-host and dear friend, Brad Hill. We are joined today with a host of people from Luke 5 Adventures. We have Trish, Kevin, and Whitney here with us today, and I am just thrilled to have this conversation and to learn more about this opportunity in the outdoors, this ministry, this endeavor. Trish and I, we go back to our days when we both lived in Memphis. Her husband and I were friends at the church that we attended, and we connected with them through that. And a fun fact about Trish is that she hiked the Appalachian Trail. She and her husband hiked the Appalachian Trail. Was it Trish? Was it on your honeymoon? Is that?
Yeah, we went to Hawaii for 2 weeks first, and then we went and hiked the Appalachian Trail. So
okay,
it was about a month after our honeymoon.
Wow, what a fun series of events there.
That might be a whole episode by itself.
Sure.
Exactly. Well, and we're joined with the founder and president, Kevin Schwieger, of Luke 5 Adventures. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. And we're also joined by Whitney Blackston, who's the vice president. And Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about Luke 5 and what this is?
Yeah, Luke 5 Adventures is a ministry. We are headquartered and kind of base up operations in the Cincinnati, Ohio area, although we are quickly becoming a nationwide ministry. Our mission statement really is to create community, bringing families impacted by disability closer to Christ, showing empathetic love by making the impossible possible. And kind of our tagline kind of says it all, in that we hike with those who can't hike themselves. So this story goes back just a little over 2 years ago, when I returned from a particularly inspiring hike in Kentucky. And I was all anxious to tell people about a new trail, new sights and sounds that I had experienced. And I'm also a pastor. I've been associate pastor of a church in the Mason, Ohio area, suburban Cincinnati, for 10 years now. And I walked into church that next Sunday morning, and one of the first persons I encountered was a lady. She at the time was 70 years old, in a wheelchair from a car accident 20 years ago. And I walked up to Debbie, the sweetest lady, and I almost said, "Hey, Debbie, man, you should have seen," and the words stuck in my mouth. In hindsight, I'm convinced that God held my tongue in that moment, because it just, in that 2-second little interval, I could just feel that expressing all this excitement about what I had experienced, but it's something that she could never, ever experience herself. And I thought that would be insensitive. So never really talked about that. Well, that conversation that never actually happened just haunted me for the days after that. And God just put this restlessness in me that this is just not right. All of this beauty, God's incredible and awe-inspiring creation, is not available to so many people. And so we need to fix this. So like we all do, I turned to Google and looked for a piece of apparatus that would do what I wanted to do. It was a really frustrating search, because there just is no, seemingly, there's tons of companies out there that make certain adaptations to the regular wheelchair or walker or whatever that allow people to get into the grass or maybe the gravel or something. But I was like, no, I want to take Debbie to the bottom of the Grand Canyon or up Pikes Peak, or, some kind of crazy place. And so finally happened upon this piece of equipment that's manufactured in France by a company called the Joëlette Company, and began communicating with them, and they quickly led me to their US based sales porthole in Denver. And that guy convinced me that this is indeed what I was looking for. So we made a few phone calls here to some influential people, raised the money, purchased one of those. It came, and we took Debbie to a local state park, and we were down in the creek bed and up and over 3-foot tall trees and across a suspension bridge. And it just totally rocked her world and ours. She had convinced herself, or come to the realization, that she would until the day she died and got a glorified body, that she would never, ever, ever be able to experience creation ever again. And so it was just so touching and so heart gripping. Anyway, took pictures, shared that on social media, and pretty soon it just seemed like it was the next day that the story just started getting bigger and bigger. Organizations in the Cincinnati area like Children's Hospital and the Parks Department and Association for the Blind and Make-A-Wish Foundation started calling, saying, you know, would you be able to serve us? And fast forward 2 years, we've taken over 400 hikes in 40 parks in 9 states. Last summer, we got some pretty cool nationwide media exposure through Christian Broadcasting Network. They came out and filmed a story and put it on 700 Club.
Oh, wow.
One of the people that saw that story was in the corporate offices of K-Love Radio in California. And so he called and did a telephone interview, and that for 2 or 3 months broadcasts all across the country. And then we started getting calls from places like Colorado Springs and Tucson and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Wisconsin, saying, how can we do this too? And so we quickly moved from just a local ministry to now opening chapters all across the country. In the past, like I said, in the past couple of years, we've done over 400 hikes, but now I'm looking forward to doing 4,000 or 40,000 hikes because of having these chapters all across the country. The real impetus to making us viable and respected as kind of knowing what we were doing really came through our relationship with the Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. And that relationship was introduced to us through Whitney, who you just introduced as my vice president. Back in those days, she and her husband had just moved up from Mississippi because of the special needs of their daughter, and was involved in therapy at Children's Hospital. And I remember a day in a room not very far from where I'm sitting right now that it was becoming apparent to me that this was going to be bigger than I could accomplish myself. And I asked Whitney, I said, hey, would you consider being my co-director at the time? And she looked at me and she said, well, I'm not really sure what that means, but okay, sure. And I said, well, I'm not really sure what that means either, but let's just do this. And you know, it's becoming the rest is history kind of a story. So I want to turn this over to Whitney and have her just kind of give her perspective as not only my vice president and doing a lot of the groundwork for this whole thing and building the validity of this ministry, but also as a parent and her experience. So Whitney, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so like Kevin said, I'm originally from Mississippi. My daughter, she has some significant medical needs. She's completely blind. She's hearing impaired, nonverbal, has significant craniofacial anomalies, which she needs a trach to breathe because of those. And she also eats by G-tube, and she has a vent when she sleeps at night. She has mobility challenges. And I know all of that sounds very grim, but she's a very happy little girl, in part due to being able to spend time in the outdoors. But we were looking to move where we could get more resources for her, because we were quickly realizing that she had a lot of potential. And so we found ourselves at Grace Chapel and met Kevin around the time that he was beginning this ministry. And so, like he said, the rest is history. But we were believers before we had Emerson, and we found ourselves isolated and having a difficult time dealing with life as special needs parents. And so we we were introduced to a ministry during a very difficult time in our life called Johnny and Friends. And they brought us off of that island. And I found value in rejoining the world, essentially, despite our difficulties. And that we were not alone. There were a lot of people out there that also struggled with different things. And so when I was introduced to this opportunity, I thought, how interesting that my family was served in such a beautiful way. And I can now turn around and do the same thing. And community was one of those things that I really found was very important for us in that journey. And so that's sort of what my passion is. I love the outdoors, but for me, bringing in those families out of that darkness, out of that isolation through the outdoors is what I love to do. And so I think it's interesting that I went through all of that struggle and those dark times in my life to help me be uniquely qualified to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And so sort of what we're hoping to see in the future is my husband, he was a manager, a regional manager in Mississippi for an organization. And he had this map on his wall with different pins where the offices were located. And when we got to thinking about what this would look like long-term, I thought, what if we had pins just like that all across the United States? But those pins were the church coming alive beyond the four walls, bringing families like mine out off of those islands, out in, through the outdoors and things like that. I mean, we never had a dream to go out and be in the outdoors and do these things until now. We feel like we're finally living because we're realizing these dreams. We're finding our love for the outdoors, and it's all made possible because of this mission, this dream, this organization. So.
Yeah, that is, I absolutely love that. I love that you have a personal connection with it, just, through your daughter, and the ability to give her these experiences too, even though she's limited in some ways, she's still able to enjoy so much of God's creation. And, you mentioned community, and, I think that I feel like there is so much that, that we have learned going through this pandemic of, being isolated from one another for so long, about community and the value of community. And like you said, taking people off of these islands and letting them see that, here we're in this together, and not just in a pandemic, parents who have children with disabilities feel this all the time, feel like they're all alone in this world. And we have a lot of listeners who have children with disabilities. And so I know that they can relate to that. I know Brad has he's having a little bit of internet connectivity issues at the moment, but one thing that I think he wanted to ask was, what is the significance of Luke 5? Can someone speak to that?
Yeah. In the 5th chapter of Luke is the account of the group of friends who had a friend of theirs that was a paralytic, and they wanted so badly to take him to go see Jesus. Jesus was speaking in a house in a nearby town. And so undeterred, they figured out a way to make that happen. So they built a stretcher and they carried him to go see Jesus. And when they got there, they found that that the house was so crowded they couldn't get in. So again, undeterred, resourceful, they climbed up the stairs, got on top of the roof, cut a hole in the roof, and lowered him down to go see Jesus. So basically, it was a group of friends that all teamed up together to help their friend go see something amazing that he could not go see on his own. And that's exactly what we're doing. The beauty of, there are, and I'm not going to say we're absolutely unique in the literal sense of unique as in no other, but I'm pretty close. There are so many opportunities out there for people with mobility challenges, other sports and things, but for some reason, hiking is not one of them. And so, put yourself in the position of a person in a wheelchair or with some significant mobility challenges, and there's zero way to get to, a creek bed or across a bridge or whatever. 99+% of God's incredible creation is outside the context of the room, or the bedroom, boardroom, schoolroom, or whatever. But for so many people, they're limited to the 0.1% through no fault of their own, with zero opportunity to go see the 99+%. And another thing that's just really been fascinating to us that we've discovered, for the first year or so, we in conversations with Whitney and others, I was struggling to answer the question, why has this been so profound to so many people? It seems it seems so basic, and so I couldn't figure out why to all these non-faith-based organizations are they beating down the doors to ask us to help? Why is this so profoundly impactful to these families? Well, that answer came on a mountain top in near Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, in the Pocono Mountains. We were there serving the Tim Tebow Foundation and their new property called Rising Light Ridge. After the day's activity, they told us about a waterfall up on top of the mountain. And so Whitney's daughter Emerson was there. And so we put her in one of the pieces of apparatus we call Rosie. So we put her in a Rosie. There was no trail really to speak of. So we just traipsed ourselves up to go find this waterfall.
Straight bushwhacking.
Yeah, exactly. That's the beauty of this. It'll go anywhere you want it to go. It doesn't have to be accessible. We can, we specialize in the inaccessible. So anyway, so we're bushwhacking up this mountainside, found the waterfall. Emerson absolutely loves water, and she would be a little mermaid if she could. But so we put her down by the pool of water, and she was playing with her hand in the water. The director of the property there took a photograph of her hand half submerged in this water, and God absolutely orchestrated the lighting of this photograph. It looks like her hand is half submerged in mercury or liquid silver. And Whitney looked at that photograph and she said, that reminds me of Psalm 42, the deer panting after the water and God quenching my soul's thirst. And she said, Emerson has no concept of what it means to physically thirst because nothing ever enters her mouth. But she has a soul that's thirsty.
Wow.
And she lacks the traditional means of quenching that soul's thirst. You and I can quench our soul's thirst by time in the Word or fellowship with other believers or worship or whatever. Emerson has trouble with so many of those things. And so in that moment, with her hand playing in the water, God was quenching her soul's thirst. And so that was this huge aha moment for us, that's the why, is that there are so many people, they may not even know they have a soul. Even if they knew, they might not even care, or they can't put words to it. But that doesn't mean their soul is not thirsty to be quenched by God. And he, in his infinite care and love, can choose to quench that soul in non-traditional ways. And so that's really what's happening through our activities.
I want to see that picture.
We'll get it to you. It's incredible. I have another picture of a young man, his 30-year-old young man. We were serving a Johnny and Friends family retreat in Alabama. His name is Warren, and big old dude. 5 years ago, he and his brother were walking down the sidewalk, and some hoodlums came up behind them, shot him in the back to steal his tennis shoes and watch or whatever. The bullet entered his spine, so he's paralyzed from the waist down now. Well, we took him to a creek bed in Alabama, and his brother was along. Now, his brother, this was the first time they had been together since the accident. They've been estranged since then because of the trauma of the accident. We took him down to the creek bed and we turned our head, but when we turned our heads back, they were laughing and giggling and playing in the creek, splashing one another. And I have this, I mean, just incredibly heartwarming pictures. We asked him what was going on, and he said, "This is the first time we've played together. And when we were little, we used to play in the creek. And this is the first time I've been able to do that since then."
Oh,
and
that's good.
So God was, once again, God's just showing off here, quenching Warren's soul's thirst through the ability to go down into a creek bed and splash his brother. Opportunities that without Rosie, they would never have this opportunity.
That's good. Yeah, I think one of my questions, that you sort of answered as I've been struggling with my internet connection was, the Luke 5 story is their buddies getting their friend to Jesus for healing, which is, pretty much what you've explained. It's not for salvation, right? We're not saying you find salvation in the outdoors. If that were the case, we wouldn't need the cross, right? But it does indeed bring healing. And those are the beautiful stories that you've been sharing. That, man, that's incredible. Accessibility to the outdoors does, it brings healing in our soul. It's just a lot more visible for somebody that's been starved of it, right?
Yeah, and in the Bible, multiple places tells about Jesus showing himself through his creation. And you don't have to be a believer to be impacted by that. And again, these people, these individuals may not, and their family members may not even know or care that that's happening, but it's happening nonetheless. Gives us an opportunity to have those conversations. Another kind of comical, you talk about the Luke 5 story. Part of our mission or our ministry is to our volunteers, because these volunteers, many of them come to us through Facebook friends of a friend or whoever. Many of them don't even know about the spiritual kind of twist to this whole thing. And there's been multiple times where I've been on a trail and somebody comes up to introduce themselves to me because somebody has said, "Hey, there's the guy that started this," or whatever, go talk to him. And I've had multiple times where people come up and say, "So are you Luke?" they have no idea, right? And so it gives me a chance to say, "No, I'm not Luke, but funny you should ask. Let me tell you who Luke is."
Yeah.
And so I'm a very target versus tool thinking kind of guy. So my target remains unchanged. My target is always to introduce people to Jesus Christ. Well, the tool can be, you name it, it doesn't matter. In this case, the tool is hiking with this crazy piece of apparatus. Just gives us an opportunity to reach the target that we're all shooting for.
You mentioned the impact on the volunteers. Trish, you're a volunteer, and you work with volunteers. How did you get involved with this? This is something that I had never heard of until 2 years ago. And so, what is your role, and how has this impacted you? And have you been on some of these hikes? Kind of tell us what's going on with you with this.
Yeah, so Kevin and I actually do not attend the same church that Kevin and Whitney do, but I knew Kevin we were both doing CrossFit at the time, and he was one of the coaches. So that's how I met Kevin. Kevin knew that I had a background in backpacking and hiking. And I don't know if he mentioned the timeline of when Luke 5 started, but it was kind of at the end of 2019, beginning of 20. And we all know that was a crazy year. I personally had been in a very stressful season of my life. I, was going to the gym at 4:15 in the morning. I'd get up, go to the gym, and then work. And I just was at a really, probably not a very good place in my life. I didn't know that until after the fact, that I was as stressed as I was. My husband was traveling a lot for work, so I was, single parenting 3 kids a lot. Well, in God's goodness, I actually lost my job because of COVID. And that was probably one of the biggest blessings of 2020. And because of that, I all of a sudden had all this freedom that I had not experienced in a couple years, a little bit more flexibility to, not be so stressed. But I had also just kind of been journaling and praying over those years of being so a little bit overwhelmed. God, I just don't feel like I'm able to serve in my community that you've moved us to. As you mentioned at the introduction, we met in Memphis, and we 100% feel God called us to Ohio. But I kept saying, well, God, why did you call us to Ohio? What is my purpose here? And because of me losing my job, and Kevin just at the start of it, just asking anybody and everybody who wants to help, I was like, I've got all this free time, I want to help. So my first opportunity was actually, we went down to Mississippi for one of the Johnny and Friend weekends, and I was pretty much hooked. And as someone who does have such a love for the outdoors and has spent a lot of days backpacking and hiking, climbing mountains, it was a real eye-opener to me that there's so many people that don't get to experience that. And I felt like, that was a way for me to give back. So I fell in love with the ministry, and my desire to be around other people, my desire to give people the same experiences that I get when I, just go out with my family. It's been really such a cool experience. So I've been on, I don't know how many hikes I've been on, but quite a few.
So, you've been on, I think you said 400 different hikes. Are all of these participants, are they all children? I know you took the lady in your church, but is it primarily children, or is there a mix? What's the demographic?
We have a wide range of people. We've had the youngest being, I think he was 18 months old when we took him, and that was down in your neck of the woods somewhere in Alabama. And the oldest, Kevin, correct me,
84, I think. So
we were supposed to take out some 90-year-old. Only 2 hikes that we've canceled this year were with a group of 90-something-year-old hikers that we had like a crazy storm come in, and we just felt that was against our better judgment to try to take them out. And it was like a hurricane practically. We're like, we probably should, cancel this one. I think that's the only 2 hikes we've ever canceled. And they would have been our oldest at 95 or something like that.
Oh my goodness. Well, you mentioned earlier the something you were doing with the Tim Tebow Foundation. What is that, and what is that something that's an ongoing relationship, or what is going on with that?
Yeah, we were introduced to them through a man at our church who used to work with the 2 guys who are now the president and one of the vice presidents of the Tim Tebow Foundation. I'm extraordinarily envious. Somebody donated 3,000 acres in the Pocono Mountains to the Tim Tebow Foundation a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And so they are breaking ground even as we speak to build a multi-million-dollar camp and conference retreat respite center outside of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, up in these mountains. Well, because of the relationship of this guy in our church with them, that he used to work with them, introduced them to what we were doing. And so they reached out to us to have us help them figure out the hiking component of this new property. And so we were able to orchestrate several pieces of equipment to be delivered to them, and went and trained them about how they could be used and this and that. And our relationship will just be developing as that property develops. The other thing that they are known for nationwide is for their prom experiences for those with disabilities, called Night to Shine.
Yeah.
And so they are now launching kind of the next generation of that, a program called Shine On, which helps churches develop ongoing year-round meaningful disability ministry. And so they've asked us to be kind of part of that curriculum too, so that the future is really not ill-defined still at this point as far as that relationship, but it looks like they will be suggesting to all of these churches across the country that they consider Luke 5 Adventures as part of their programmatic offerings. So great bunch of people. It's a tremendous organization, and we have fun traveling out there and doing things with them. And we're just leaving it up to God what that looks like in the future.
One of the taglines that we use in the introduction of the podcast is finding clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us. You've told a lot of wonderful and beautiful stories just about how this has impacted those that you've helped get outside. But for each of you, what has been an experience that you personally have been deeply affected by this? Not watching others, but for yourself, how have these adventures personally shaped each of you?
I'll start. You got Whitney and Trish. You can join in. I've been in the ministry, church planter, associate pastor, on staff with Athletes in Action, Campus Crusade. That's been my life. I've been in the ministry for over 30 years. I have to confess that the world of those living with disabilities was out of sight, out of mind for me. I'm a kind-hearted guy, but that world was just never, it was just not a part of what I even thought about very much. And so for me, it's almost like God has awakened for the first time in me a real heart for something that I should have had a heart for all along, but just didn't, because I just really never had the opportunity or whatever. I can make excuses, but they're all excuses. And so, Whitney and others have really taught me, and it goes back even to things like how you speak, the words that you use, the phrases that you use, the dialogue, and the descriptive things that it's all part of realizing that we are all image bearers. God did not make a mistake. Emerson has challenges that I will never have. But at the same time, Emerson is going to be responsible for more people entering the kingdom of God than probably I will ever have. And so he did not make a mistake when he made Emerson. He allowed Whitney and Jeremiah to go through some dark times and protected them through 7 or 8 or 9 years, so that they could come out on the other side and be so strong and see rock stars for the kingdom, and allow them the strength to give their child over to God as a conduit for kingdom growth. And so for me personally, it's been an awakening that I'm so appreciative of.
That's good.
Yeah. So for me, it's many things, but the two things that stand out to me, for the most part, is through this journey, like especially just for families who are impacted by disability in general, but we have a hard time seeing how to find our place in the kingdom to serve, because unfortunately things aren't always accessible. And then of course, the burdens we carry and those types of things. And then of course, the lack of community and that isolation. It's hard to see ourselves serving in such a way to help grow the kingdom. but we obviously, we desire to do that. A lot of us desire to do that. And through this journey, I have found my place in the kingdom, and it's in helping to grow the kingdom. And it's been honestly one of the best experiences of my life, the most beautiful journey of my life, despite the hardship to get here. It's on the other side of this, it's amazing. And so in addition to that, this past, in reference to Kevin's telling about Emerson in the water that day, that actually led to Emerson learning about Jesus and me teaching her. And I'm sort of ashamed to say that I didn't necessarily give her the benefit of the doubt in how to teach her about her faith and live that faith out, because maybe I thought, how can I teach her and how will she understand what a lot of people consider an abstract concept? Obviously we don't, but without your vision and her ability to communicate what she's understanding, I thought maybe it's too hard. And so I continued teaching her about the Lord after that day, because I thought how beautiful it was to watch the Lord reveal himself to her through living water, through water. And so fast forward to October, she's understanding who God is, the creator, and she's loving him, and she's developing these concepts of, him as who he is to her. And so we found ourselves celebrating at the end of an event, October the 3rd, back up there at that waterfall. And we were just sort of talking about a baptism that had happened that summer. And my husband and I, we've been sort of thinking about, like, what does it look like for Emerson to make that declaration and be baptized? And we didn't really want to influence that. We wanted her to do that independently. And so I sort of like acted in faith, and I was like, I really want to baptize her, but I really want her to understand. And I didn't know if she was going to understand or not, but I began giving her the language and telling her, Jesus is your friend. He's living water. And she had begun, understanding these concepts. He's her God. And we love him. We ask him to come into our hearts. And through that, she just, all of a sudden, as I was telling her the words to say, she said, Jesus, I want.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, what? She didn't need me. The Lord just did it through her. And so I got to actually help baptize my daughter at, in a beautiful waterfall.
Oh my goodness. That's
witnessing that and finding my place in the kingdom and helping with kingdom growth. I mean, it's been a beautiful journey all the way around. Getting to know the people that we serve, those people are heroes. They're amazing, and they teach me. Even though I am impacted by disability, they teach me.
That's good.
Another thing, I'm going to encourage Trish to tell her story about her kids too. One of the things we find as people in the world navigate relationships with those with disabilities, it's often super awkward and disheartening and insulting sometimes or whatever. And so one of the things that's a byproduct of this is, as we have volunteers who have kids experiencing these hikes, and Trish can give testimony about the impact that these hikes have had on her kids as they've learned to not be awkward around those with disabilities, to actually develop friendships. And Trish, why don't you say something about that?
So as Kevin was saying, it's kind of a whole family thing, and we love it when our volunteers bring out their kids and their spouses and just make a whole day of it. And there was a particular day that we were going out on a hike, and sometimes we know ahead of time who we are taking hiking. Sometimes we don't. But my youngest, I don't know if she was 7 or 8 at the time, but you have to know her personality. She's a bit of a fireball, and to know her is to love her. But she's all in no matter what it is, whether it's all happy or all sad, all attitude, all, she's great. But she, for some reason, said, Mama, I want to go hiking with you today. And I really, really did not want to take her, because on some of our family hikes, she will be the one that's complaining about, I'm so tired. It's so hot. I need water. I'm hungry. And I really didn't.
I need a snack.
Yeah. She's like every quarter mile you need a cookie type person. And I honestly, as the mom, but also going as a volunteer, I thought, I really don't want her to hinder my ability to serve. And I'm afraid that I will be, dealing with her the whole time, that I'm not going to be able to serve these families. But I just said, fine, you can come. So I brought her along, and we get there, and the little girl that we're taking hiking was the exact same age as her. And a lot of our hikes, the parents do come along with the kids, but in this particular situation, and they're usually, like an hour, we'll go half hour out, half hour back. But this particular family did not, because they had several other kids, and they just decided to stay back and let the hike be for their one daughter. And she was the exact same age as my daughter. And they talked and they laughed and they giggled. And my daughter would go and get her rocks and show her rocks. And it was just the coolest experience to see her role as a companion to these hikers. And, God just kind of slapped me on the head and said, it's not just about you. There's a need for people of all ages to serve. And, since then she's come on several other ones. My oldest one has come along, and just to be able to do that as a family is really great. We've, got some hikers that we've taken who might have older siblings. And when we take them out on hikes, we make sure the whole family is being served. So if they have a teenage daughter, it's nice to have a teenage daughter that can hike along with them and talk to them and not feel like they're being left out because, they're not the ones like that we're necessarily taking on the hike. So it really is about serving the whole family. And I love that my whole family gets to participate in that as well.
That's so good.
So, we talk about these hikes. This is a year-round ministry, I assume. I know there's some parts of the country that gets a little more difficult at some times of the year, but is this something that people can join you in? If you're in their part of the world, if you're in Alabama, could we, here in Alabama, join in on a hike with you? How can we get involved? How can our listeners get involved?
Yeah. So we are in the process of opening 5 local chapters in other parts of the country. And so starting in the spring, we will have chapters in Colorado Springs, Tucson, near Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Cleveland, Dayton, Ohio, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so each one of them will have their own kind of sphere of influence. We here in Cincinnati, just because we have the bandwidth, oftentimes travel to other places also. And so we're constantly looking for volunteers, also looking for other churches and individuals that would like to start up. So I can imagine in 2 years' time, we'll have another dozen chapters. So I'm a very say yes and then try to figure out how to accomplish yes kind of guy.
I can relate to that.
to the angst of my wife oftentimes. And I'm being a very bad influence on Whitney because she's becoming the same way. And So anyway, moral of that story is that we could use all the volunteers we can get from anywhere in the country. And so don't let your listeners not communicate just because they live in a different place. We'll try to figure out getting people involved. One of the programs that we are seeking to launch this spring is going to be, we're calling it Hike of a Lifetime, which is going to be our version of a Make-A-Wish kind of an activity. And so people can apply for their wish to be fulfilled, and that may need to happen any place. And so we will not only are looking for local chapters to open out across the country, but also looking for churches that are anywhere in the country who might want to say, hey, we love to be involved at least in the providing volunteers when you're out our way. And we're developing what that looks like. But for instance, we're going to take a young woman who was not supposed to survive her first couple of years of life because of brain tumor, and she's now graduating from high school. And so for her graduation present, we're taking her on a national park tour out west at the Badlands and Rocky Mountain and Yellowstone.
Nice.
And so Whitney has been communicating with a church in Wyoming to say, hey, we're going to be in your neck of the woods. You don't really have to do anything except provide some volunteers when we're out your way. And so there's some opportunities, non-traditional opportunities where people can get involved.
That's fantastic.
We also serve family camps through, family camps, Johnny and Friends. And so, for those who would like to give, several days in their summer to come and help volunteer during that time as well, we would love to have help. We're actually going to be in Alabama for Johnny and Friends Family Retreat 2 weeks this summer. And so, any of your listeners that would like to sign up to do that, they could just sign up on our website and they'll get our emails and our communications to stay updated on that.
Yeah. What part of Alabama is it going to be?
Kind of north central Alabama. It's a Christian camp called Camp McDowell.
Yeah. So how are you guys funded? Is this something where people can donate to, or are there funding needs?
Yeah.
Is it...
The preferred way of donating is to write a check or through the website, and you start with a number that is somewhere between 1 and 9, and then you add a whole bunch of zeros before the decimal point. That's the best way to do it. But we covenanted from the very, very beginning that we would never charge our families to have these experiences.
Wow.
I don't want to have any part of any conversation where somebody says, hey, I'd like my daughter to go on a hike, but we can't afford it. So we are 100% funded by individual and corporate donations, as well as seeking grants and foundation gifts and things like that. And so, people can donate through check or through our website, the donate tab on our website.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put that in our show notes.
Yeah, we'll make sure all that's accessible on the website and the show notes. We always close our conversations. We ask, what's your next adventure? So what's the next hike on the books for you guys?
We have a pretty new relationship with Mammoth Cave State or National Park in Kentucky. We were just down there last Saturday, and part of it was us wanting to just get involved and to build a relationship with the National Park Service. But they're kind of in our backyard, and so I met with their supervisor down there at the park, and she said that she grew up with a dad who was in a wheelchair, and so she was all about this. But talk about inaccessibility. There's just no way that somebody in a wheelchair can get down into that cave, and so we said, well, let's start a process of going down there regularly and giving people those opportunities. So we did that last Saturday, and we're going to follow that up again in February and in March. beauty about caves is it can be 10 degrees and snowing outside, but it's 55 degrees in the cave.
Yeah.
I have one of the things I'm really excited about over this next year, just with my love of the Appalachian Trail. We are in the process of training for a 3 to 4 day hike with one of our veteran hikers. He's kind of been what we call our guinea pig, about 20 some years old, and he had a farming accident when he was in his teens and still has that sense of adventure. And so I'm super pumped because I love the Appalachian Trail. And so we're going to take him on that for what will be our first overnight experience. So we're actually training for that, trying to get to where we're able to, carry the Rosie for several hours, and also for him and his comfort level that he'll be able to sit in it for long periods of time, because it is a little different than his wheelchair. And just to, be able to help him camp at night, something, he hasn't gotten to do as much of lately. So I'm really pumped about that. That's going to be not in the summer, but it's going to take the next 6 months of training. And there's a team of probably 15 of us that will be helping make that happen for him. And he's pumped. We're going to be going to the Smokies.
That sounds like a phenomenal trip.
Absolutely.
Whitney, what's on your horizon?
When Kevin mentioned the national park tour earlier, my family's going to get to participate in that as well.
Great.
So I'm super excited I'm looking forward to that. That's one of those dreams that we never had until we knew we could. And so one of our dreams is to visit as many national parks as we can. And so we've got 3 under our belt, and now we're looking forward to 3 more.
That's definitely some of those that are on my bucket list as well. And so that's inspiring me to want to go out west and try to hit up some of those national parks. That's phenomenal. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us and for taking your time to spend with us today. We're so thrilled to hear about this opportunity for people who who want to continue to get people outdoors at whatever cost, and overcoming so many obstacles in more ways than one. So thank you for sharing that about Luke 5 Adventures. Brad, you do such a good job of closing us, and we'll let you lock it down for us.
I echo Brian's sentiment of thank you for your time and sharing your stories with us, but also what you're doing for those that can't get out there. That's incredible. And we hope the folks that listen are inspired to partner with you guys, whether it's financially or to come alongside you physically on the trail, which would be incredible. We're thankful for those who listen. We don't make any money off of this. We're just really having a great time talking to all kind of folks, and meeting all kind of neat folks. And so that was certainly the case today, to be able to meet you guys. We're thankful for listeners. We're also thankful for those that take time to leave reviews. That's one way we're able to grow this podcast and to cast sort of a wider net for those to hear about things like Luke 5. So leave a review for us to help us grow the podcast. And most importantly, share these conversations with a friend. Maybe you have someone in your life who needs to go on one of these hikes, and share these stories in this podcast episode with them. And that goes a long way in helping us grow this podcast. And one of the things that we're all about is building that community that you're talking about. We're doing that through these conversations, digitally building a community through the podcast. So thank you for being a part of that. And we hope this story certainly encourages you and challenges you to go write your own stories and share your own adventures in the storied outdoors.